pursuing happiness. You're doing all right. When... The other guy's around and he means business, so get going. Remember, you're off base. You've just got time to save yourself. Drop whatever you're doing. Find the nearest hole and make like a mole. Pick a room in a good building, close to the ground. It ought to be airtight and light-proof as possible, with the doors shut, windows closed.
It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do.
If you saw it advancing on you a mile away, you'd have about 30 seconds to take cover. Make for the nearest entrance, but be orderly about it.
If you are at home when a surprise attack occurs, crawl beneath a table if it is very near, or drop to the floor with your back to the window.
That fog has contaminated everything it touched with radioactive matter, which we'll call hot stuff.
After many generations of living under fear of a nuclear war, with constant reminders from government commercials such as the ones you just watched, it didn't take too many images of New York from 9/11 to bring back familiar fears and to scare a whole nation that had never been attacked in its own territory before. Confused by the fear of an unknown enemy and the thirst for revenge, Americans easily accepted a war, the invasion of Afghanistan, which had actually already been planned to the smallest details.
And anger to resolution. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
Right away, the United States accused Osama bin Laden, though they never produced the evidence they claimed to have against him. Also, nobody seemed to be surprised by the lack of motive from bin Laden himself. This was as if everyone was ready to accept the fact that he hated our civilization just because somebody pointed a finger at him. The first thing that every past terrorist made known is why the attacks were made. However, a few days after 9/11, Osama clearly stated that he had nothing to do with them at all. In 2006, the FBI stated that they didn't have any hard evidence against bin Laden, which contradicted their original statement. Actually, what he was wanted for was his involvement in the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Officially, Osama bin Laden was never wanted for the September 11th attacks. In the following clip, Alex Jones, a popular radio host, talks about Osama bin Laden 1 month before the 9/11 attacks.
If there is any terrorism, we know who to blame. If any terrorism comes, it's from this government. And if there was an outside threat like a bin Laden who was a known CIA asset in the 80s, he's the boogeyman they need.
However, as more evidence is gathered that 9/11 was an inside job, it seems more likely that 9/11 wasn't the job of a whole government, but of a small group of people within the government that called themselves the neocons, or neoconservatives, which included Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Perle, and Donald Rumsfeld, who all funded the project for the new American century.
In my opinion, treason. The cabal of neoconservatives at PNAC, I think you all know what that is, who planned this war, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Libby, Perle. This cabal knew the American people would not stand for a war against Iraq unless there was, as they put it in their own document, a new Pearl Harbor. 9/11 supplied that.
The American Constitution doesn't allow the United States to wage a preemptive war and reserves the power of declaring war on another nation to Congress. This means that every time a president has wanted to enter a war or start a new one, he had to wait for a military incident, whether created or provoked, to justify the use of force in front of Congress and the American people. In 1898, the United States went to war with Spain in order to take the control of the Caribbean area. The pretext came from the sinking of the USS Maine, which was anchored on the outside of Cuba. The Spanish were blamed right away, even though they denied any involvement in it. Images of the sunken ship, as well as those of the funerals of the dead soldiers, were shown in the first movie theaters in the nation, moving the nation to allow Theodore Roosevelt to start a war that he had already planned. Only in 1980 would America recognize that the Spanish were not responsible for the attack, and that the ship actually exploded because some explosives were stacked too close to the steam room, though this may have been done on purpose too. Either way, America had now new strategic positions from the Caribbean all the way to the Philippine Islands. In 1915, it was the sinking of the Lusitania by a German submarine that would bring the Americans into the First World War. However, it also appears that the U.S. had secretly slipped to the Germans that the ship was carrying a special cargo of weapons, heading to England. The ship also just happened to be carrying more than 100 American passengers. In 1941, it was the Pearl Harbor attack that allowed President Roosevelt to declare war on Japan.
The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
3,000 soldiers died in that surprise attack, but history would later reveal that the administration knew of the attack in advance, but did everything possible to delay the transfer of information to the Hawaiian port. Here, Admiral Kimmel, the port's commander, confirms this.
I did not get this information.
In 1964, the United States decided to officially declare war on North Vietnam. This happened after the Tonkin Gulf incident, where North Vietnamese boats were accused of launching torpedoes at the USS Maddox, right after Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara announced the battle plan.
It was just confusion. And events afterwards showed that our judgment that we'd been attacked that day was wrong.
But 40 years later, McNamara would confess that the attack on the Maddox never took place.